Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
I think it's pretty much a simple concept, but I think it's also, based on your frame of reference too. For me, as let's say I was explaining to a bright-skinned brother, right, light-skinned brother, which actually this happened the other day. I usually put it in terms of black and white, though, right, because most black people can understand the black and white privilege, the inherent privilege that comes along with that. And let's say it was a light-skinned woman. A lot of times I, would explain it from the male-female perspective, because most women can kind of understand that dynamic that's at play. And so I think in this dynamic, I would just kind of, use the whole racial dynamic to make them understand that there still is privilege by you being light-skinned, and all the, the historical context that, is underlying, but every country had that dynamic, I have some family that's from Belize, and you have what they call the Coolie, right? And Coolie is usually a lighter complexion, straighter hair, still black people though, and all the privileges that came along with that. Most people can kind of understand, especially black people, when you start to put it into the whole racial context, because we all understand black and white. We all understand that, at least in the dynamic here in America, that white people have a lot more privilege than black people. So within my own family, right, my brother is actually, same mother, same father. He's bright skinned. He's a red complexion, and so growing up, this is the 80s, since you want to date me. Growing up in the 80s, especially, there was this heavy leaning toward, lighter complexion guys, right? The Albie Shore look, right? The light complexion with the curly hair. And I think I started to understand that very early on, because within my own family, they'd be like, "Oh, y'all brothers? Oh, what happened to you?" I never even, wait, what? Because you never even, when you're a kid, you never really thought about that. Y'all are brothers, everybody's doing the same thing. And then when somebody says something like that, you're like, oh, wait, what is wrong with me? And then you start to think about, well, why do I look different? And then when you see people react differently to him, versus me. And it wasn't that I was a confident kid. It wasn't that I was not getting attention, but that dynamic, that it even caused somewhat of a sibling rivalry, I would say, and that kind of stuck with me for a while. You start to actually, in the back of your head, subconsciously, man, I wish I was bright, Unfortunately, I feel like no kid should even have to think like that. And it got so bad, right? This is, might be the first person I've actually said this to. I have kids, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I wanted my kids to be bright, which is ridiculous. When I think about, the older me thinks about that, the younger me even wanting my kids to be bright skinned, hoping they come out bright skinned. And not necessarily not necessarily because it would make life easier. I think it was just because I thought that people would have a better reaction to them. I didn't want them to encounter some of the same feelings that I encountered growing up, Of course, now I've, totally erased that out of my brain, but it really did take a lot of self-reflection and kind of just digging deep within my own self and understanding, and even doing some research on colorism to unpack all of that, and so now actually I'm sad to say I ever even thought that, So you feel a little bit less than, right? Especially when you feel like people are judging you based on the color of your skin. So you're saying, well, gosh, if they think this about bright skin, then I wish I was bright skinned, So maybe some envy to a degree, right? We're brothers. Like I said, it caused some sibling rivalry, some anger, maybe resentment. and he probably played on that, at times because kids can be kids, with some of the jokes, that we say. And again, it's not that I wasn't a confident person, but I think we all have insecurities that we deal with. And so just in that dynamic, um, um, even though I didn't show it, but it definitely stuck with me. And so I think it manifested itself though into those thoughts, like I said, referencing kids. Not something I'm proud of, but that was a real thing. I really, I don't think I said it out loud. It was just kind of like one of those hopes, like, man, I hope my kids, are bright skinned. I think it took me, I was probably somewhere in later teenage years where I started to kind of just say, oh, that's just stupid, it's just stupid, to even feel that type of way. I think the older we get, you either start to pick apart yourself or you start to love yourself. And I think I started to just really start to embrace, what I saw in the mirror. And so hopefully I'm better for it. I think that, that was actually wrapped up in a larger transformation I was trying to go through. I was a wild child to a degree. Some issues within, the family dynamic. And so some anger issues, things that I knew that even at a young age, I didn't like about my own self, And so I used to spend a lot of time thinking to myself. I spent Saturday mornings. Most weekends I would wake up and I would just stare, right? But it would be my time of reflection, right? I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. But I was really thinking through a lot of the different things that I knew that I did not like, And I think in that process, I didn't know it was a process. That was one of the things that I started to kind of just think about, like, why is this way? Well, why do I even care about that, right? And like, so for instance, one of my brothers, we're in South Louisiana, right? And so we have a thing that we call being color struck, right? Guys especially, have this thing about being color struck here in South Louisiana. If they know anything about South Louisiana, there's a whole Creole population. It's black folks, but this Creole population, and he was definitely leaning heavily toward that, which was odd to me, because I found myself starting to intentionally, once I found the beauty in my own self, start to try to intentionally unpack, because I knew some of this was, being placed upon me, right? I was being taught this by the images I was seeing, right? So I decided to change the images I was looking at, I decided to intentionally go out and look for images of just brown, beautiful brown people, and that went a long way, I think, and just kind of helping me develop my ideas. And then when I started kind of reading, this whole notion of colorism, I didn't know what it was called, but the fact that it had a term, and kind of reading, up on it a little bit, watching the, certain documentaries, dark girls, light girls. I started to gain perspective and started to be able to even try to educate my younger brother that I was talking about, who thought he was color struck, So just planting those seeds, in my own self, and then trying to plant seeds in others. Like, if you can understand race, then you can understand light skin versus dark skin, right? And we all like to be so proud, especially I think we're moving into a renaissance of this whether it be Black Power, Black Lives Matter, whatever you want to wrap it up under. But we're certainly becoming a little more conscious, of ourselves, right, and loving ourselves as a people. And so if you can understand race and white and black, then you can certainly understand light and dark. And most people, when you really start to break it down, they get it, right? Now, you get some pushback from some of the bright-skinned people, because it is tough to acknowledge your own privilege, right? As a man, I've had to, sometimes I fought against that myself, but many times, when I put it into context of black and white, right, I always go back to that because that is universal for most black people. If you can understand that, then you can certainly understand how people look at not different races, but different colors or different shades or different hues of people differently, and so just really try to, have plain talk conversation. Luckily, I do a lot of mentoring anyway, and these young people, they're smarter than we think they are. They really are. They get it. There was a girl at McKinley last year never forget that. I felt like we were making some inroads. I was proud, you know, and she was talking about being picked on for her. She was from Africa. Family had moved here, and I mean, she was a beautiful shade of, I mean, really dark sister, but beautiful shade of brown. And she was talking about her experience of being picked on when she came here because of the color of her skin amongst black people, not necessarily just bright skinned people, but just, you know, American black people, right? And not for being African, but more so because she was not maybe your typical shade that we see here in America, right? And so I remember hearing some girls, it's about 3 or 4 girls that was kind of sitting behind me talking like, I wish I looked like her, you know, like I don't know what she's talking about, but I wish I looked like her, right? And that kind of made me feel a type of way, like, man, you know, maybe we are getting somewhere with this conversation, you know, because in my day, you know, again, the 80s, you know, we saying some really messed up stuff, African booty scratches, you know, oh, you black as, you know, as this, and, you know, black as that. That was definitely a negative, you know, and to kind of hear her, she probably experienced some of that, but to hear some of these younger people in this day, somewhat envious of her skin color, I thought, you know, like, wow, maybe we are kind of getting somewhere with this. But certainly, yeah. So I guess from a street level, or just from a manhood level, certainly, you know, the darker guys are looked at as the more masculine, right? The more, maybe even more aggressive too, though, right? Which then leads to a whole other, you know, host of issues when we start talking about issues regarding, you know, police interaction, right? Or, you know, going in for jobs, right? I think black men and black women, you know, we already are tagged with this whole angry black man or angry black woman syndrome. And guess what? We got a lot to be angry about, you know, for good reason. But we aren't just walking around here, you know, looking to slap people in the faces, you know, just attacking people. But I think that I think that follows us, you know, wherever we go, you know, subconsciously, you know. I'm not saying, you know, the implicit bias is a real thing, and people carry these things, you know, you make these associations when you see certain people, and there are differences even amongst black people, right? I argue with, gosh, some of my friends all the time about this subject, you know. A good friend of mine, I won't say his name because he'll probably he'll try to fight me for saying that, but I remember a couple of years ago, he was saying, you know, man, black women are losing out here, right? I'm just like, wait, what? You know, we do this thing where we kind of, you know, we might send each other pictures of different things, right? And so I started intentionally sending him pictures of beautiful black women, you know, all different, you know, shades, shapes, sizes, to try to get him to see things differently, right? You will find the beauty if you just start to try to actually absorb it, right? Because right now what you're doing is being taught a certain thing, right? You're being inundated by all these images. You're being sold this idea of European beauty, right? This is the standard of beauty. And when really you like what you like, you just haven't really searched it out. And you haven't really begun to appreciate it. You know, look around, like look at the sister right here. You're telling me that you cannot find beauty in that sister. And I've seen some change in that conversation over the past 2 years. Even some of the, you know, pictures he'll start to send me back, like, oh man, you know, it's interesting because, you know, 2 years ago, you know, his idea was that, you know, black women out here losing, you know, and not that he doesn't love black women, you know, married to a black woman, you know, but I think he was thinking overall, you know, because what he's been sold is this idea of what beauty is, and we know what hair should look like, and this, that, and the third. Is like, bro, come on now, you know, look around. Stop being so caught up in the weaves, and stop being so caught up in saying, hey, that, you know, the straight hair, this, that, and the third. Love the kinks. Love your own skin. Start to love yourself first, right? Because I think if you can start to love what you see looking in the mirror, right, then I think that'll be also reflecting in how we view our women. That was a long answer, wasn't it? And I was very winding. I have started to try to shy away from even saying I prefer dark-skinned women, because I don't think that even that's problematic. You know, we should see women as women, and love them in all these different hues and complexions, especially black women, you know. And so I've tried to shy away from that because, you know, I think putting too much importance, right, on the color of anybody's skin whether it's darker or not, you know. And even though I might be trying to overcompensate for some of my own experiences, or there's a kindred, you know, experience that I have with a sister, you know, I can relate with your, you know, with your struggle, you know. It still though can be problematic, and that's in the sense that it's at the expense of another black woman, right? And so I try to even, you know, shy away from that, you know. But to Kodak's, I mean, that's ignorance. I mean, it's just, you know, don't fight me, you know, because, you know, I left that world a long time ago. But no, I really think that you said, he said, women who look like me, you know, that is a bit of self-hate though, right? When you really kind of break that down, you know, I'm sure in his own way he loves himself, I'm sure, right? But I'm talking about really loving the skin that he's in, right? I think he's wrapped himself up in that imagery of black masculinity, but more so dark skin, you know, equaling, you know, masculinity. Nobody should be able to place, you know, any sort of tag on you. You define for yourself who you are, right? And so then to take that experience and then to kind of project that now onto black women is even more, it can be traumatic in the sense that now you're assigning, you know, these labels and these roles onto different black women, you know. Light is dainty and, you know, acceptable, but these dark skinned girls, they ratchet out here. Come on, bro, like, do better, you know. Do better.
Heartthrob never.
Yeah.
Black and ugly as
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. I remember that lyric actually, you know, when it came out. But it wasn't so much from, I guess, from the term colorism, right? I remember thinking like, geez, like, dang, bro, like you don't love yourself, you know what I'm saying? Like, dang, like you really think that you're ugly, right? And part of that is the dark skin part of it, you know. It's sad in a sense, right? I mean, at the same time, he does flip it, right? Because he's overcoming it with his own bit of confidence, right? But what led you to the place to even, you know, have to examine it in that way, you know? Because it does speak to how you are viewed, right? And then how that kind of, if you're heartthrob, you're never the heartthrob because you're black, you know. That is a problem, you know. I think, what was it, Wesley Snipes might have been the first dark-skinned brother that was a bit of a heartthrob, you know.
Maybe Sidney Poitier.
Well, yeah, you're right. Sidney's more, you know, he's more of a candy brown, though, you know.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah,
Wesley was like dark chocolate, you know. Yeah. Sidney's more like Denzel, you know, and that's not, again, it's not bright skinned by any measure, you know. But certainly Wesley was really kind of not breaking the mold. Not that he did something by breaking it, you know, but just by existing, you know, and being able to be, I guess, a heartthrob in a sense, you know, was I even recognized it at that young age, you know, because I am young. It was just saying in my family, I won't say who said it, but she would say, what was it? Man, I gotta be on point here. Nothing black but a Cadillac, and it better have white wall tires. You know, and it's funny, you know, when you hear, right? I grew up listening to her say this, right? Love her to death, geez. But where does she get that from, right? And then it also speaks to the mentality that we have been brought up with, you know. That was to say that don't bring no dark, don't bring these dark brothers home. You know what I'm saying? You need a little white in there to kind of lighten it up. You know.
You think women are just as color struck?
Absolutely. One way or another, right? But absolutely. You know, not to go too deep and historical with this. Our lighter sisters, you know, back in the day, typically, what you would find, and even in my own family, right? We have there's rape, you know, coming from the plantation, right? So the slave master, he, of course, he has his way, right, with the slave girl, and he has Julia, I think is her name in our family, right? She's high yellow, right? But what does Julia do? She goes and marries the darkest brother she could find, you know. I think we've seen that, you know, played out in movies. Queen, I believe, was one where you see them trying to maybe overcompensate for something that they're feeling. You know, they feel less than black, you know. And so one way I can do that is by darkening my gene pool if I get the darkest brother, right? And that's how you end up, you know, 3-4 generations down the road with Geno, who might be brown, and in the summertime, I might be considered, you know, dark, and having my brother over here who's considered bright skinned, you know. I think so. For me, I think we're moving though. I think I think the needle has begun to move, and not begun to. I mentioned Wesley for a reason, is because that's when I first felt a shift, right? There was a representation, and not, there was a representation in all the ways that it should be, right? It wasn't just the sexualized dark-skinned black guy. This guy was a superhero. This guy was a saxophone player. This guy was, he was everyday Joe Blow black man, right? And moving, I guess, into, you know, today, like, there are a lot of them out here, you know. I mean, this might be our season right now, you know. If the 80s were, you know, for the light-skinned brothers, you know, we have kind of held it down, you know, the mid-90s on into the 2000s, you know. And that's not to, you know, again, you know, that whole light-skinned, dark-skinned thing, you know, let's cut that out. But seriously, we've begun to be represented in every facet of life, right? Much in the way that, you know, any marginalized group wants to be just seen, right? Not celebrated. You know, at some point you have to stop being celebrated for being, you know, the dark-skinned brother, or the woman, you know, in the room, or the black person, you know, the first black this, you know. You just kind of want to just be, you know. And it's not that I don't think it's great. I do think it's great, you know, that we can even, you know, that we are recognizing it, right? But, you know, you mentioned Kofi, you know, I don't feel, I mean, you're a woman, you could probably speak to it better than I could, but I don't feel that he's necessarily being, you know, sexualized in the sense that, oh, he's the, you know, the big black buck, right? I think we are starting to appreciate and see the beauty in that dark skin of his, you know, and that dark skin of ours, you know. And that comes in his shade, it comes in my shade, it comes in yours, it comes in Barack's, you know. These are the different hues that, you know, that we all have, you know, and we should appreciate even the darkest among us, you know. I could be wrong though, you know. I've been wrong once or twice in my life.
How would you say we move forward?
Talk about it, acknowledge it, you know. I think for years we really didn't talk about. We talked about it jokingly, right? But I think we are talking about it in a serious fashion now, right? The jokes are fine, you know, to a degree, as long as it's not. I don't think we should be pitting, like, you know, light skin versus dark skin. I really don't believe in that whole thing, unless it's like the most light joke, right? You know, if it's a very lighthearted joke, sure, but pitting, you know, those two groups against each other, I've always felt a little uncomfortable with that. But if we are talking about it in a serious manner, right, and recognizing, you know, that one, there's a discussion to be had, but then also there's education that needs to be done, you know, surrounding it. There's privilege that needs to be acknowledged, right? And then there's also growth that needs to be done, you know, on our side sometimes, you know, because we can be our own worst enemy, you know, as black people, but also as darker, hued black people. Sometimes you believe the hype, you believe what you've been, you know, told, and so you believe the lie, you know, and then all we do is perpetuate that same thing and pass that down, you know. Geno McLaughlin, I'm years old, and from Memphis, Tennessee, by way of New Orleans, more so by way of Baton Rouge, so.